Hey everyone! Today I'm going to show you how to crochet this adorable truck. So I love that you can fill the bed with anything you'd like, perhaps one of these other crochet characters from us, for a sweet gift. So the pattern calls for DK weight yarn. It takes approximately 1.5 grams in white, 2.5 grams in black, 26 grams in red, 3.5 grams in pink, and about 1 gram in pastel yellow. You're also going to need a 3mm crochet hook in addition to your normal crochet items like yarn needles, stitch markers, embroidery floss, and stuffing. However, the gauge doesn't matter much. You can use any size yarn and matching hook size as long as you adjust the yardage of yarn accordingly. If you're using a larger weight yarn and larger hook size, you'll end up using a bit more yarn. So for today's video, I'm using a 4mm crochet hook and worsted weight yarn. If you haven't already, be sure to snag the matching greeting card to make an adorable and one-of-a-kind gift that your friends and family will love. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so we are starting in on the truck's cab, and we're going to be using this red yarn, and we need to start by forming a magic ring. So let's do a quick recap on how to get a magic ring started, and then how to place our first few single crochet stitches inside. Alright, so let's review how to form a magic ring. So we're going to start by taking a little length of our yarn, and I'm using white for this demonstration. Make sure you're using the correct color for the pattern that you are following along with. So I'm going to take this white, and I'm going to reserve myself a little bit of a tail. So I'm going to take the end of that yarn, and I'm going to stretch it so I've got about 5 inches or so of a tail. And the tail is going to be the end that is not attached to our ball of yarn. So once we've got about 5 inches or so reserved of that tail, we're going to take our yarn hand. For me, that's my left hand, but if you're a left-handed crocheter, this might be your right hand. But we're going to take our yarn hand and make a bit of a finger guns here. So my index and my middle finger, I'm going to put them together, and I'm going to be looking at the inside of them. Then I'm going to take that tail that I've reserved, that 5 inches, and I'm going to lay it so that it's over the lower digit on my index and my middle. And then I'll take my thumb and I'm going to press the yarn to those 2 fingers. Then I'm going to take my hook hand, which is for me my right hand, but could be your left hand, and I'm going to grab the working yarn. Once I've got that grabbed, I'll take it and I'm going to wrap it around the back side of my index and my middle finger so that it's sort of close to that top digit. I'll flip my hand over so you can see. So I want it to be close to my top digit, so you can see it's closer to the 2 tops of my fingers here. So we're going to wrap that around, and then once we've got it around the top digit of those 2 fingers, we're going to bring it so that it goes behind our thumb again. So I use my thumb and I pinch that second wrap in place. Then we're going to keep wrapping, this time going around the lower digit on our 2 fingers. So I'll flip my hand over so you can see these 2 wraps here. This is that one I just made, going around that lower digit. So we'll wrap around that lower digit, and then we're going to take our working yarn and one more time snug it behind our thumb, and then just pull it out of our way. So once we've done that, we should have 2 wraps and this sort of X shape on the insides of our hands. So once we have all of the yarn wrapped around our yarn hand here, we're ready to take our crochet hook in our hook hand, and we're going to flip our yarn hand over so that we're looking at the back side of our fingers. So we should have 2 wraps, one around the top digit, one around the lower digit on our yarn hand. We're going to take our hook and slip it underneath that top wrap, and then use the hook part to snag that lower wrap and bring it underneath the top wrap. Then we're going to take both of our hands and we're going to flip them over so that we're looking at the inside and away from our body. So I'm flipping out and away from my body. And then I'm going to bring my 2 hands together, so my yarn hand and my hook hand. I'm going to bring them so the index finger here on my hook hand can touch the back side of my yarn hand. Then using the thumb and index finger of my hook hand, I'm going to grab both the wrap on my hook and the wrap still on my fingers right where they meet. So I'm going to kind of snag the 2 of them together right there. Once I've got those pinched between my thumb and index finger on my hook hand, I can let go with my thumb and then gently slide those wraps off of my index and middle finger. So now that I've done that, let's locate both the tail, that's the end that's no longer attached to our ball of yarn, so it's got this blunt cut end on it. And we're going to kind of pull that over into the 12 o'clock position, so kind of up and away. And then let's locate the working yarn. That's the stuff still attached to our ball of yarn. So once we've got those two identified, we're going to take the working yarn and begin tensioning it. So to do that, we'll take our index finger on our yarn hand. That for me is my left hand. Could be your right hand for you if you're a left-handed crocheter. And we're going to slip the working yarn over the top of our index finger. Then we'll take our middle, ring, and pinky finger on our yarn hand, and we're going to wrap those around that working yarn. Once you've done that, we also need to sandwich this working yarn in between our magic ring and our tail. So to do that, I like to take my middle finger and thumb on my yarn hand, and I'm going to grab that tail with my middle finger here. And then with my thumb, I want to grab the ring. So we don't want to grab our working yarn, which is kind of going in through that ring. We want to just get the bottom end of the ring here. And once you've got those two, we're going to kind of pinch them together. And you can see that sandwiches our working yarn in between the two of them. Once we've got those grabbed with our yarn hand, we can let go with our index and thumb on our hook hand. And the ring here that's on our hook is really loose. We'll tighten that by pulling our index finger up and away. You can see how that tightens that yarn. And then once we've done that, we're ready to yarn over and draw through the loop on our hook. So we'll take our hook, put the yarn over our hook, so I kind of just swing around the back side there and grab it. And we're going to pull that working yarn directly through the loop on our hook. Once we've done that, you can let go. It's not going to come undone. It won't come untied, which is very comforting because we've spent all this time creating it. The last thing we need to do before we're ready to begin is we're going to take the tail, and you can see it's threaded through our magic ring. We're going to take that tail and we're going to pull it out from the center of that ring. And from here, we're ready to begin working in the magic ring. We also need to work over the tail as well. So we'll take that ring and we'll take the tail and we're going to set them together so that we are working over both of these strands, the ring and the tail. All right, you are ready to go ahead and continue on in your pattern. All right, so now that I have my magic ring formed, I'm ready to start in on round 1. And all of the rounds here for the truck's cab are going to be joined rounds, which means we're going to be slip stitching to the first stitch of the round and then chaining 1 before we start our next round. So we're going to go ahead and begin our first round by placing 8 single crochet stitches inside of our magic ring. So I'm going to be working in both the ring and over the tail I used to form the ring too. So I'm going to kind of hold those two together here in my yarn hand in between my thumb and my middle finger. And then I'm going to hold the loop here on my crochet hook as I take my hook and pass it through the ring and under that tail. Then I'm going to yarn under. So I'm kind of swinging my hook over the top of my yarn here and grabbing it and drawing it through and up into a nice tall loop here on my hook. And then to finish the single crochet stitch, I'm going to yarn over. So I'm kind of swinging my hook around the back side of the yarn here and pulling it through those 2 loops left on my crochet hook. And that forms our first single crochet stitch. We're going to go ahead and mark this stitch here. So I've got my stitch marker. I've slipped it right underneath both sides of that stitch. Then I'm going to continue adding single crochet stitches in that same manner until I have 8 stitches total. So I'm going to go through the ring, yarn under and draw up a loop, yarn over and draw through both, Alright, so once you have all 8 single crochet stitches inside of your magic ring, you can pull the tail to close off round 1. And to finish round 1, we're going to slip stitch to the first stitch of the round. So I'm going to take my stitch marker out. I'm going to go through that stitch, pushing through both sides of the stitch from front to back, yarn under and draw up a loop, and then draw that loop through the loop on my crochet hook, and then chain 1. Alright, and then we are ready to start round 2. So round 2, we're going to be increasing in each stitch all the way around. So this slip stitch and this chain 1 don't count as a stitch. We're going to make our first increase in the same stitch that we slip stitched in. So I'm going to go through, yarn under and draw up a loop, yarn over and draw through both, and then I'm going to mark that first stitch of the increase. And then I'm going to make a second single crochet stitch in that same spot. So go through again, draw up a loop, draw through both. You can see I have my increase. I'm going to continue adding 2 single crochet stitches to every stitch all the way around, which is going to give me 16 stitches total at the end of round 2. Alright, so I'm all the way around. I have all 16 of my stitches, so we're going to slip stitch to the first single crochet stitch that we made, and then chain 1. And that wraps up round 2. So round 3, we're ready to start with a parentheses pattern here. So inside of those parentheses, we have some instructions. We need to do everything inside in the order it appears, the amount of times indicated outside. So we're going to be putting 1 single crochet stitch in the next 3 stitches. So we're going to go through the same stitch that we slip stitched to. Go ahead and mark that stitch as well. So that's the first. Here's my second single crochet stitch and third. And then in the next stitch of the round, we're going to place 3 single crochet stitches inside of it. So we're just going to put, it's like an increase but an extra stitch on top of it. So you can see there are those 3 single crochet stitches. Then I'm going to repeat that repetition, the parentheses, another time. So 3 single crochet stitches, 1 in the next 3. And then 3 single crochet stitches in the next stitch. So that's twice. I've got to repeat that pattern 2 more times for a total of 4. Alright, so I've repeated that parentheses pattern 4 times, and you can see that sort of squared my piece off a little bit, which is exactly what we wanted. So now that I've got that repetition pattern done, I'm going to slip stitch to the first single crochet stitch that I made, and then chain 1. And I'm ready for round 4, starting with 1 single crochet stitch in the next 4 stitches of the round. So again, right into that first stitch, the one that we slip stitched to, and then mark 2, 3, 4. So there are those 4 single crochet stitches, and then 3 single crochet stitches in the next stitch of the round. We're trying to keep this top part of the cab square here. Alright, so now that I have those 3 single crochet stitches, I'm ready to start another parentheses pattern. I'm going to put 1 single crochet stitch in the next 5 stitches of my round. Followed by 3 single crochet stitches in the next stitch. And we're going to repeat that 3 times total, so 2 more times for me. Alright, so there's that last repetition. So to end this round, I need to put 1 more single crochet stitch, so in this last stitch here. And then I'm ready to slip stitch, and chain 1. Alright, so that is round 4 done. We're ready for round 5, and round 5 we're going to be working in the back loop only of every stitch all the way around. So far we've been working through both the front and back loop by taking our hook and sliding it underneath both sides of our stitch. But to work in just the back loop, we need to snag just this loop closest to where our magic ring tail is. So we'll slip our hook kind of in between the front and the back loop, grabbing just the back loop, and then make our single crochet stitch as normal, but only in the back loop of the stitch from the previous round. So we're going to just be putting one single crochet stitch in each back loop. You can see I'm sort of just slipping my hook in between the front and the back loop so I can only work in the back loop here. And that's going to leave the front loop behind, which is what we want. So that's just one single crochet stitch in every back loop all the way around. Alright, so I am all the way around and I need to change colors here. So I'm going to be slip stitching to this first stitch. So I'll go ahead and go through. And we're not going to cut the red, we're going to be coming back to it. So we're going to pull through this slip stitch with our new color, which is pink. Alright, so I have my new color, which is this light pink colored yarn. And I'm going to fold it over on top of itself with a little tail over here and a loop. So I'm going to take this little loop and I'm going to put it on my crochet hook and then use my hook to pull it through both the fabric of my work and the one red loop left on my hook. Then I'm going to tighten that red and hold the red and the tail of the pink together here in the back while I tension the pink color that I'm starting with. And we're going to use that to chain 1 to start our next round. So for round 6, we're going to be working again in the back loop only, but we're going to be slip stitching in each back loop all the way around. So I'm going to go ahead and go through and slip stitch. I'll go ahead and mark that as well. And when we work these slip stitches, we want to work nice and loose. So make sure you're not pulling too tight on your slip stitches here. We're just going to be putting one in each of the single crochet stitches all the way around. Alright, so there's my last slip stitch. I'm going to go ahead and end this round by slip stitching to that first slip stitch that I made. Alright, so that's that slip stitch, and then I'm going to chain 1. And we're ready for round 7, so we're going to be working in the back loops again, and we also need to work in this pink tail that we had when we fastened on. So we're going to be putting one single crochet stitch in each back loop all the way around. So starting with this first stitch that we slip stitched into, I'm going to go through and then lay the tail over my hook and then make a single crochet stitch as normal. And then mark that stitch. And we're grabbing just the back loop of each of these slip stitches that we made. I'm laying that tail over my hook as I go. But we're just going to be putting one single crochet stitch in each of these slip stitches back loops. Alright, so there's my last back loop only single crochet stitch. I'm going to end this round by slip stitching and chaining 1. And I'm ready for round 8, so we're going to put one single crochet stitch in the next 13 stitches, starting with that first, the one that we slip stitched to. So there's 1. And we're not in the back loop anymore. Alright, so there are those 13 single crochet stitches, and then we're going to be putting 3 single crochet stitches in the next stitch here. Alright, so there are those 3 single crochet stitches all in the same stitch, and 1 single crochet stitch in the next 8 stitches. Alright, there are those 8 single crochet stitches, another 3 stitches all in the same stitch here, so 3 single crochet stitches, then 9 single crochet stitches. And that takes us all the way around, and we are ready to slip stitch and chain 1. Okay, and then for rounds 9 and 10, which is our first multi-round repeat here, we're going to just be putting 1 single crochet stitch in each stitch all the way around. So as you start each new round, remember to slip stitch, chain 1, and then make your first single crochet stitch and mark it. So I'll see you back here at the end of round 10 on that last slip stitch and chain 1, so we can get our color change and move on to round 11 together. Alright, so I just finished round 10 and I'm ready to slip stitch to the first stitch of the round and change back to my red. So let's do that together. I'll take that stitch marker out, go through that stitch, and then we're going to pull through with the red, but we're done with the pink. So we'll trim a tail, and since our red's still attached, we're going to just grab the red here and then yarn under and pull through both the stitch and the pink loop left on our hook, and then pull that pink tight. Alright, and then we are ready to chain 1 and start in on round 11. So just like we did when we changed from red to pink, we're going to be working in the back loop only and making some slip stitches all the way around. It gives us a nice tidy color change here, which is why we're doing that. So we're going to go through the back loop only, and I'm just going to be slip stitching in every stitch all the way around and work nice and loose. Alright, so there's all 36 of those back loop only slip stitches. I'll go ahead and slip stitch to the first slip stitch I made here, and then chain 1. And then we're ready for round 12, still in the back loop only, but we're going to be working 1 single crochet stitch. And we also need to work that pink tail in, so I'm going to give it a quick tug really fast here, and then lay it over my hook and make my first single crochet stitch. And then just continue working 1 single crochet stitch in each of the back loop only slip stitches I made. Alright, so I am all the way around and I'm ready to slip stitch and chain 1. And then we're going to pull this chain 1 up really long and take our hook out, because we need to attach on at a different spot and make the hood, and then we're going to work the cab and the hood together. So if you're like me, I only have 1 skein of this red color, so I'm going to cut my red here and leave this loop and this long tail kind of just hanging on my work, because we're going to reattach here in a minute. But we're going to go ahead and move on to the hood, and we're going to be attaching onto the 16th stitch here of round 12, the one that we just made. So we'll count 1, 2, 3, 4. So here's that 16th stitch, and it's sort of even with that kind of square corner that we've got going on here on the cab. So we're just going to go right into that stitch, and notice I'm going from the same direction that we've been working this whole time. So the cab's facing down and the opening's here at the top. And we're going to fasten on with that same red color. So I'm going to make a little loop here out of the red, put it on my hook and pull it through. And then I'm going to take the tail, yarn over with it, and pull it through that loop that I've made. And then I'm going to tie these two together to fasten on really securely. And then lay this tail to the inside of the cab. Then we need to go back through that 16th stitch and yarn over and draw up a loop, which gets us fastened on here and sets us up for row 1 here on the hood of the truck. So we're going to be working in the back loop only, making 1 single crochet stitch in the next 10 back loops. So there's my first. Alright, so there are all 10 of those single crochet stitches in my back loop. Then we're going to chain 1 stitch and then turn our work. So we're working the hood kind of back and forth in flat rows. So after that chain 1, I'm going to just turn, so I'm looking at the other side of what I've just crocheted. So then for rows 2, 3, and 4, another multi-round repeat here, we're just going to be single crocheting across, adding a little length to the hood of the car. So this here counts as my first single crochet stitch, that chain 1, and we're going to be skipping over what looks like the first stitch of the row because that chain 1 technically fills in that first stitch. So I've got 1 going through the next stitch. There's my second, third, and 10. Alright, so I have all 10, that's row 2 done. Chain 1, turn back over for row 3. Again, skipping what looks like the first stitch because that chain 1 counts as our first stitch. So 2. Alright, there's row 3, chain 1, turn, counts as our first single crochet stitch, so 2, 3. Alright, there's row 4, we'll chain 1, turn 1 last time, and row 5, we're just going to make 1 single crochet stitch in the next 10 stitches, and then fasten off. So we've got our first, going into the second single crochet stitch for 2, Alright, so I have all 10 of those single crochet stitches and I'm ready to fasten this off. So we'll cut a short tail, 6 inches, we don't need very much. And then we're going to yarn over and pull that tail through the last loop and keep pulling until it passes through and then tighten down. We also need to weave this tail in so it doesn't get in the way as we start working around the hood and the cab together. So we'll thread this through the eye of our needle. And we're just going to be sewing it kind of into the fabric of the hood and then working it along the underside of some of these single crochet stitches. So I'm just catching the back sides of some of these stitches, maybe 5 or 6 of them, and then pulling it so that it lays along the inside of our work. Then I can unthread and trim close to the fabric of the work and discard that tail. That gets it woven in, and it's going to make it so it's not in the way as we keep working around here. Speaking of tails, let's take this moment to tuck any tails from color changes, the magic ring, to the inside of the cab, really just to keep them out of our way. And then we are ready to go ahead and return to the cab section here, and we need to start by tying our red back to our skein of red. So I'm going to grab the tail that I've cut here, and I'm just going to tie the two of them together in a simple knot. And I'm going to leave those two little tails long too. I'll just crochet over them, working them in. Alright, so we are ready to take our hook and go back through that loop we drew up really long, and then pull our working yarn so it's tightened back down. And we're ready for round 13 here on the cab, so we're going to start by putting one single crochet stitch in the next 15 stitches. Alright, so you can see I'm at that knot. I'm going to just lay those tails to the inside of my work and make my next single crochet stitch with them laying over my hook, sort of like working in our color change tail. It's really easy to reattach, which is nice. So 13, 14, and here's this 15th stitch here. You can see that takes me all the way to where we've just crocheted the hood of the car, which is great because we're going to make one single crochet stitch in the 5 sides of our rows of the hood up towards the top front of the hood. So we're getting ready to crochet up the side of this hood here. We're going to start by going in that first chain 1 that we made to go turn our row. So there's 1. Go into that next chain 1, 2, 3, 4, and that last chain 1, which is sort of like that first stitch here. So that takes me up the side of the hood. Then we need to make 10 single crochet stitches across the top of the hood. And we've already single crocheted in one of them, so we need to single crochet in it a second time. So we're going to go through, there's that first, that kind of helps you turn your work. And keep adding single crochet stitches, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and here's that last one. This is the one that we have a tail woven in through, so there are those 10 single crochet stitches across the front hood of the car. Then we need to do another 5 down the other side of the hood. So just like when we swung around, our first single crochet stitch is going to be in that same one we just made. So I'm going to go through and add a second single crochet stitch, which is the first, and keep working down the side of the hood. 2, 3, 4, and 5. Alright, so there are those 5 single crochet stitches down the other side of the hood. Then we're going to put one single crochet stitch in the 11 remaining stitches of the cab. Alright, so there are those 11 single crochet stitches, and then we're going to end by slip stitching and chaining 1. Alright, so that's round 13 done. We're ready for round 14, starting with one single crochet stitch in the next 15 stitches of the round. Alright, so there are those 15 single crochet stitches, which takes us pretty much to the hood of the car. Then we're going to be putting one single crochet stitch in each back loop in the next 20 stitches, which is all 20 on the hood here. So working in the back loop only. Alright, so there are those 20 back loop only single crochet stitches. Then we've got another 11 single crochet stitches back in the front and back loop for this round. Alright, so there are those 11 single crochet stitches. I'm ready to slip stitch and chain 1. And then for rounds 15, 16, and 17, we've got another multi-round repeat. So just one single crochet stitch in every stitch all the way around. Don't forget to mark your first stitch as you go. And I will see you back here at round 18 when we're ready to move on together. Alright, so I just finished round 17, chained 1, and I'm ready to start in on round 18, which is the last round of the cab and the hood. Just one single crochet stitch in every stitch all the way around. The only difference is we're going to be ending by slip stitching and not chaining 1 because we're going to be fastening off. Alright, so there's that last single crochet stitch. I'm going to take my marker out and slip stitch to that stitch it was just in. And we are ready to fasten off the cab. So we'll reserve a tail to sew with. We may use it to attach some more things. We may end up weaving it in, but I like having options just in case. So I'll cut about 24 inches here on this tail, then yarn over and pull that tail through the last stitch and then tighten it down. Alright, so that is the cab done. We've got a little embroidery here to do. So first, let's go ahead and grab some of this red yarn. Alright, so I've got a little length of this red yarn. I'm going to thread my needle with it. And we need to divide out the windows here on our cab. So along where those 3 single crochet stitches are on the top, and then kind of along the insides of the windows, we're going to make a couple of stitches to sort of divide those. So I'm going to take this yarn here, my needle, and pass it from the inside of the truck and up through the red, where the red and the pink meet. And then I'm going to leave a tail of this red on the inside because I'm going to come tie back onto that to secure all of this. And then I'll just send a long straight stitch down, adding sort of like that door panel on a truck. I'll come back up through the same place I went down through and sew a second stitch just to really reinforce that shape. Then I'm going to move over here to the other side and come up through the top of the cab. So you can see that adds the detail for the side window where it meets the windscreen. It's also another Then do the same thing over here. So come up where that corner is on the top of the cab. So you can see that makes the window here. And also this one down. And last, I'll come up, sectioning off Alright, so I'm going to send my needle into the inside of the car. You can see that adds that detail so you can have the different sections, side windows, front and back window. Then I have my tail on the inside here, and I want to kind of flip my truck inside out because I want to attach onto the tail whenever I started, which is right over here. You can see we got quite a lot going on inside of our truck, so we want to make sure we grab onto this tail. So I'm just going to sew a couple of stitches straight over, just picking up a few on the inside of the truck. So I'm close to where I started sewing. Then unthread my needle. And we're going to tie these two tails together. And we'll do a little cleanup while we're in here too. So I'm just going to make a double square knot. Doesn't have to be a really tight knot either. Then we can trim these two short. And while we're in here, let's go ahead and give all the other tails a short trim. Magic ring tail here. All my color change tails. Just to kind of clean things up a little bit. Alright, we can flip back the right direction. You can see that adds that detail. So we have windows and a windscreen. Then we also have a little detailing to add to the windows itself with some black embroidery floss. Alright, so I have my black embroidery floss threaded through my needle, and I'm going to come up through the bottom left corner of this window over here, passenger side. Though I suppose if you're in any other country besides the United States, this is technically the driver's side. But I'm going to leave a little tail of this black on the inside. And we're going to just sort of outline the windows with some straight stitches. So I'm going to go up and then come back out through where I went up through. So adding a little square shape. Then I'll run a stitch along the bottom of the window. I'll come up here. Then I'll sew down and come up through that same spot I went up through last time. And then sew across. And I'll also send my needle out through the back windshield here. So you can see that adds that detail shape onto the window. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. Also across and then down. Alright, so I've got two of the windows sewn on, and I'm actually going to go ahead and tie these two tails together. So I'll flip my window or my car inside out here, and my tails are really close together, but if they're not, remember you can just kind of pick up some of the stitches along the inside. I'll go ahead and do that just in case. Then unthread your needle and tie those two tails together. And trim. And we'll need a little more black embroidery floss so we can do our other two windows, the driver and the windshield. Alright, so I'm going to start on the windshield here, coming up through the bottom corner, just like I did with the window. Leave a little tail on the inside, and sew up. Come back down. So there's the front window done, and I came up through that top right corner. I'm going to go right back down and come up through the bottom left corner of the window here. And then just sew that last window detail. Alright, so there's that last window's detail added. Just like with the first window, we'll flip the truck inside out and sew across so that we are close to where we fastened on. I'm not close this time, so I need to sew some of my stitches here. Alright, unthread my needle, and I'll tie these two together. And trim them short. Alright, so that wraps up all of the details here. Car doors sectioned out and the detailing added to each of the windows. So we're ready to move on to the next part of the pattern. Alright, so next up we're starting in on the bottom of the truck, and we're going to be working with this red colored yarn, and we need to tie a slip knot and chain some stitches. So let's do a quick review on how to tie a slip knot and how to chain. Alright, so let's review how to tie a slip knot and how to form a chain stitch. So we're going to take our yarn, and I'm using white for this demonstration, so just double check you're using the correct color from your pattern. And we're going to reserve ourselves a little bit of a tail, just like we do with our magic ring. So I'm going to take maybe 5 or 6 inches or so of my working yarn here. make myself a little tail. And then we're going to take that tail and we're going to wrap it behind our working yarn. So we're sort of making like a lowercase letter B. So once we've got that wrapped around, we formed this loop here. We're going to kind of sandwich the working yarn with the tail. So bring it back around and kind of cross it over that loop. Sort of like a pretzel twist. Then when we've done that, what we need to do is draw this twist that we've just done, that strand, through this loop without pulling the tail all the way through, because that would just tie a knot. So I take my hook hand, which is my right hand, and I grab what I've laid over that loop and pull it. And then with my other hand, I grab my working yarn and then pull the loop through. And the reason I form my slip knots this way is because they tighten when you pull on the tail, but not when you pull on the working yarn. It won't tighten while you're trying to add stitches to it. So once you've got that slip knot formed, you're going to take your hook and slip it inside of the slip knot, and then pull the tail to tighten it into a loop down onto your hook. Then you're ready to begin tensioning by laying the working yarn over your yarn index finger. So for me, that's my left index finger. And then wrapping the rest of your fingers around our working yarn. And then I like to hold on to the slip knot itself with my middle and thumb on my yarn hand. And then we're ready to form a chain. So to chain, we'll take our hook and we're going to yarn over, meaning we're going to put the yarn over our hook, and then draw the working yarn through the slip knot we tied, and then pull up to form a nice tall loop. So that's our first chain. To continue chaining, we're going to just keep yarning over and drawing a nice tall loop through each time. One final thing though, the loop on your hook, as I'm sure I may have mentioned in the video before, that doesn't count as a stitch. This is sort of like a stitch in progress. So right now I have 2 chain stitches formed. I'll yarn over and draw another stitch through. That'll be 3, 4. And as you add chain stitches, I tend to move my middle and my thumb up closer to my hook to help me sort of tension my yarn a little easier. So as I chain, I just keep shifting my hand down the stitches that I've just created. Alright, so that's how you tie a slip knot and chain. Alright, so I have my slip knot tied and I'm ready to start chaining for row 1. I need to make 9 chain stitches. Right, there are all 9 of those stitches. Then I'm going to turn, and starting in the second chain from my hook, never counting the one on our hook of course, I'm going to start single crochet. So I'll put my first single crochet stitch in there and just keep single crocheting. Alright, so there are those 8 single crochet stitches. Then I'm ready to chain 1 and turn my work. Then for rows 2 through 11, we're just going to be adding 1 single crochet stitch to each stitch, chaining 1 and turning. So remember, just like with the hood, that first stitch of our row is actually already complete. That chain 1 takes its place. So you'll start right in on the second stitch, and with the number 2, counting your way all the way up to 8, 3, 4, 5. Alright, so that's row 2 done for me. I'm going to chain 1 and just keep working back and forth all the way through until the end of row 11. So I'll see you back here whenever I have that row finished and we're ready to move on together. Alright, so I just made row 11 and I made my chain 1 and I'm ready to turn. And I'm going to start in on row 12, which is just 1 single crochet stitch in all 8 stitches here. So 3, 4, Alright, so that's row 12 done. Row 13, we're going to start by chaining one, and then we're going to be working along this sort of chain edge of all of our rows, working back and forth. So I'm going to put one single crochet stitch in that same stitch that I already have a stitch placed in, but sort of like on the side here. So one, and then continue adding single crochet stitches to all 12 of those chains that we made to turn our rows. Alright, so there's that 12th single crochet stitch here. Then I'm going to chain one and then work all 8 of the other side of the chain we made to start with here. So starting in that first. I'm going to pull that tail, and I'm going to work this tail in as I work along this side here, which is the last side we need to work. We'll chain one and then 12 single crochet stitches along this other side here, working in our tail as we go. Alright, so there's that last single crochet stitch. Then I'm going to slip stitch into that same stitch I made my last single crochet stitch. And we're ready to fasten off. I'm going to make a long tail here on this bottom patch, so 24 inches. And since we've already slip stitched, we can just pull and tighten. I'm going to trim this here. And we're going to attach the bottom to the bottom of the truck, but before we do, I'm going to weave this tail from the truck in. Turns out I don't actually need this to sew, so let's get this woven in. Sew straight through, then catch some of the single crochet stitches here at the back, then trim. And then we're going to attach the bottom of the truck here, sort of sewing the stitches together. So I'm going to thread my needle with the tail left over from the bottom that we just crocheted. And I'm going to sew most of this on, then stop, take a little time to stuff, and then finish sewing the bottom of the truck on. So let's start by lining up the bottom of the truck. I'm kind of squaring off the truck where the windows sit, kind of just pinching. And then I'm going to line up this rectangle shape so that it's in line with the corner of this window here on the back. And then we'll attach by sewing through one stitch on the panel of the back of the truck and then one stitch on the bottom of the truck. So I'm just working my way across, sewing each of these together. I'm just going to keep working around, whip stitching through each stitch. Alright, so I'm ready to start sewing along the side of the truck here. So I'm just going to keep sewing one to one through each of these stitches. Alright, so that's two sides of the truck sewn together. I'm ready to sew across the front here. Alright, so I've got one side left to sew together here on the truck, but before I do, I'm going to add some stuffing to the inside. So We'll take a little bit and push it up into the inside of the cab, but we need to be really careful not to overstuff. So I'm gonna just add a little and then add a big handful more, pushing it out into the hood, but being really careful. If we overstuff, we're gonna lose all of these nice crisp edges that we've been trying to reinforce. So we don't want to put too much stuffing in. We want to really pull enough of it out into the hood of the car too. And then really use my fingers to kind of help keep that shape, pushing the hood of the car down, kind of squishing the windows in. You can also put some felt or cardboard here in the top of the inside of the truck if you're really wanting it to stay in shape. But if this is going to be a gift for a young child or for a pet, or it's going to need any kind of washing, I would opt to not put anything on the inside. Alright, so I've got it stuffed. I'm ready to continue sewing closed. So I'm just going to keep going. Whip stitching through one on the bottom of the truck and one on the side of the truck. Alright, so that gets the truck bottom sewn all the way around. So I'm ready to go ahead and tie a knot to secure all of this. So I'm going to make a surface knot or a French knot depending on if you have a bit of an embroidery background. So I'm going to take this red and loop it over the surface of my work, kind of making like the letter C or an O. And then I'm going to sew into the fabric where my yarn's coming out of my work and then up through the little loop that I've made. And I'll just keep pulling, and that loop's going to wrap itself around and tie a knot. And then we'll weave this in by sewing it into the fabric of the truck and then out through just any old place, which pulls the knot and weaves the tail in to the body of our truck. Then we can unthread our needle and pulling tightly and trimming, trim the remainder of the tail that we didn't need to weave in. And that is the bottom of the truck attached, ready to move on to the next part of our pattern. Alright, so next up we need to make the truck's bed, and we're going to be working again with the same red colored yarn we used on the cab. And we need to start by forming another magic ring. Alright, now that I have my magic ring formed, I'm ready for round 1. So we're going to put 8 single crochet stitches inside of this magic ring, and just like with the truck cab, this is made in joined rounds as well. So we're going to be slip stitching and chaining 1 at the end of each round. So there's my first single crochet stitch. There are all 8. Pull the tail of my magic ring, and I'm going to slip stitch to that first stitch of the round, and then chain 1. And we're ready for round 2. We're going to be increasing in each stitch. So remember, we're going to be working our first single crochet stitch in the same stitch we slip stitched in here, and then remarking. So there's that first increase. I'm just going to keep increasing. Alright, so there are 16 single crochet stitches. I'm going to pull that magic ring tail tight and give it a trim early this time around. So trim but not all the way off. And we'll end our round by slip stitching to that first stitch. And chaining 1. And that's round 2 done. Ready for round 3. I've got a parentheses pattern here to repeat, starting with 1 single crochet stitch in the next 2 stitches of the round. And then 3 single crochet stitches in the next stitch. So we're sort of squaring off just like we did with the cab. Then 1 single crochet stitch in the next 4 stitches. Then 3 single crochet stitches in the next stitch. And we're going to repeat that pattern a second time, so 2 single crochet stitches, 3 single crochet stitches in the next stitch, 4 single crochet stitches, and then 3 single crochet stitches in the last stitch of the round. And we'll end our round by slip stitching and chaining 1. So you can see it sort of gives it a rectangular shape, which is great because that's the shape our truck bed's going to be. That's row 3 or round 3 done, ready for round 4, starting with 1 single crochet stitch in the next 3 stitches of the round. Alright, there are those 3 single crochet stitches. Then we're going to put 3 single crochet stitches in the next stitch. Then 1 single crochet stitch in the next 6 stitches. So there are those 6 single crochet stitches, 3 single crochet stitches in the next stitch. Then 4 single crochet stitches. 3 single crochet stitches in the next stitch, 6 single crochet stitches, then 3 single crochet stitches in the next stitch, followed by 1 single crochet stitch, and we're ready to close off that round by slip stitching and chaining 1. And that is round 4 done, ready for round 5, starting with 4 single crochet stitches. And if you haven't noticed already, the 3 single crochet stitches that we're putting in 1 stitch is falling in the second of the first 3 single crochet stitches. So our first 3 single crochet stitches, our second one's going to be in the middle one each time that we go through here. So 3 single crochet stitches in the next stitch, then 8 single crochet stitches. We're adding 2 to each side because we've got to account for the 3rd single crochet stitch and the first of those clusters of 3. Right, there are those 8 single crochet stitches, another 3 in the same stitch. Then 6 single crochet stitches. Next cluster of 3. 8 single crochet stitches. Followed by that last 3. And then 1 single crochet stitch in the next 2, the last 2 of our round. Then we're ready to slip stitch and chain 1. And that wraps up round 5. We're ready for round 6. We're going to be working in the back loop only, putting 1 single crochet stitch in every back loop all the way around. So there's my first. Alright, so there's that last back loop only single crochet stitch for me, ready to close off this round. So we'll slip stitch and chain 1. And then for rounds 7 through 9, we've got another multi-round repeat. We're back in both the front and back loop for these rounds. Just 1 single crochet stitch in each all the way around. So I'll see you back here whenever I have finished round 9 and we're ready to move on together in the pattern. Alright, so I just slip stitched and chained 1 here at the end of round 9. I'm ready to move on to round 10. So around 10 we're back in the back loops only, putting one single crochet stitch in each back loop all the way around. Alright, so there's that last back loop only single crochet stitch for me. I'm going to slip stitch and chain 1. And then I'm ready for rounds 11 through 13. Back in the front and back loop, just one single crochet stitch in every stitch all the way around. So I'll catch you back here whenever I am done with round 13, and we're ready to move on to round 14 together. Alright, so I just slip stitched and chained 1 here at the end of round 13, and I'm ready to move on to round 14. So round 14 we're going to be working in the front loop only. So we've done a lot of back loop only on this project. Front loop only, we're going to kind of take our hook and slip up through from front to back in between those two loops, grabbing just the one closest to the surface of our work. And then working in the front loops, we're going to begin by placing one single crochet stitch in the next 4 front loops. So here's this first. You can see I'm sort of just slipping my hook from front to back, snagging just the front loop here. Alright, so there's that those first 4 front loop only single crochet stitches. Then we're going to make a single crochet 3 together in the next 3 front loops. So to do that, we'll grab our first front loop, yarn under and draw. So to do that, we'll grab our first front loop, yarn under and draw up a loop, go through our second front loop, yarn under and draw up a loop, and go through that third front loop, yarn under and draw up a loop. So we have 4 loops here left on our crochet hook. We'll yarn over and draw through all 4 of those loops to make a single crochet 3 together. Then 8 single crochet stitches in the next 8. Then 1 single crochet stitch in the next 8 front loops. There are those 8 front loop only single crochet stitches. Another single crochet 3 together, so grab your first front loop, second front loop, third front loop, and pull through all 4. Then 6 single crochet stitches. There are those 6 single crochet stitches. Then another single crochet 3 together. Then 8 single crochet stitches. Another single crochet 3 together. Then 2 single crochet stitches, which wraps up our round. So we'll slip stitch and chain 1. Alright, that's round 14 done. We're ready for round 15. We're not working in the back loops anymore. So 3 single crochet stitches. Then another single crochet 3 together. So it's just like what we did last time, but rather than grabbing the front loop, we're going to go through both loops for those 3 stitches and then pull through all. Alright, so there's that first single crochet 3 together, 6 single crochet stitches next. Then our next single crochet 3 together, 4 single crochet stitches, single crochet 3 together, 6 single crochet stitches, then single crochet 3 together, then 1 single crochet stitch, and we're ready to slip stitch and chain 1. Alright, that's 15, round 15 done. We're ready for round 16. Starting with the parentheses pattern here, we're going to repeat it twice. So 1 single crochet stitch in the next 2 stitches of the round. Then single crochet 3 together. Then 4 single crochet stitches. Single crochet 3 together. Then repeat that a second time, so 2 single crochet stitches, single crochet 3 together, 4 single crochet stitches, and single crochet 3 together. Then we'll slip stitch, and chain 1. And we're ready for our last round. We're just going to be decreasing 8 times total. So to do a decrease, it's a lot like a single crochet 3 together, but rather than 3 stitches, we're only doing 2 stitches. So we'll go through our first stitch, drop a loop, go through the next stitch, drop a loop, and then draw through all 3 to make our first decrease. And we're just going to keep decreasing. Alright, so there are all 8 of my decreases, and we'll fasten off by slip stitching. And then we need to leave a long tail to sew with. So reserve yourself about 24 inches of a tail here. And then pull until that tail passes through your last slip stitch and tighten it down. Alright, so let's do a little shaping here first. Alright, let's do a little sewing here first. We need to close this last round off, and no, we don't need to stuff the inside of this. It's going to be flat. So let's take our tail we've cut and start it through our needle. And then we're going to be sewing through each of the front loops of those 8 decreases from our last round. So I'm kind of going to the left here of that slip knot, or the slip stitch that I've pulled tight into a knot here. And I'm just snagging the front loop of each, pulling my yarn all the way through. And we're going to pull this tight once we've sewn through all 8 of these front loops to cinch this round closed. That's going to be the inside of the truck bed once we get everything folded. Alright, so once you've sewn all the way around, you can pull to cinch that last round closed. And then we need to do a little shaping here. So the front loops left behind from when we worked in the back loops here about halfway on round 10, those are going to kind of form the outer rim of our bed. So I'm kind of pushing where I've just cinched down flat, rolling my work, making it so that those are like at the very top of the truck bed here. I'm kind of pushing to get all of those single crochet 3 togethers into the corners of the truck bed. Right, and then I'm going to sew down through the bottom of my work, kind of coming up through where that magic ring we started through is. And then I'll sew back up through and I'm going to tie a knot to secure that. So surface knot here in the bed of the truck. Alright, so I can go ahead and weave this tail in. So I've tied a knot. I'm going to just send it in between the layers of fabric of the truck bed here. And then give it a trim. And that is the truck bed. We need to add a little bit of a detail here on these front loops that were left behind. So you can see I'm kind of just rolling so those front loops are at the very top of my work. Then I'm going to insert my hook in so it's coming from the bottom of the bed to the top into just one of those front loops that was left behind. And just like we did when we attached on for the hood of the truck, we're going to take the same color red make a little loop, pull it through that front loop, and then pull the tail through the loop that we've just made, and then tie these two together to fasten on. And then I'm going to weave this tail in as I work this truck detail here, the bed detail. Go back through that same spot and pull up a loop with your working yarn. And then we're going to be adding one single crochet stitch to each of these loops all the way around. So you can see I am putting that tail from fastening on behind my work and weaving it in as I go. But just one single crochet stitch in each of these front loops all the way around. Alright, so I am all the way around and I'm ready to fasten off. I'm going to go ahead and put one single crochet stitch in the stitch where I fastened on, and then slip stitch into that first single crochet stitch that I made. And then we're going to use this tail to attach the truck bed to the truck, so let's reserve quite a bit of it. I was thinking we'd use the tail that we wove in from the bottom of the truck, but this one's a better option for us, so we just wove that one in instead. And then we'll pull and tighten. And I'm going to trim the tail that I wove in from fastening on here. Alright, so we are ready to attach the bed of the truck to the truck itself. So we want to make sure we're attaching so that the shorter side of the rectangle, not the longer side, is attaching to the cab. So I'm going to kind of hold them up so you can see this is how they're going to be attached. So the first thing that we need to do is take this tail, thread it through our needle, and then we're going to be attaching these loops here at the bottom of the bed to the bottom of the truck. So I'm going to send this tail down from the top of the truck in between the layers of fabric here and up through the bottom. And then we're going to sew these two together so that we can kind of work our way up. So I'm going to hold the bottom of the truck here with the bed sort of sitting flat against so that I can put these back loops that were, the front loops that were left behind from when we worked in the back loop, right up against the base of the truck, kind of where we sewed the bottom to it. And then I'm going to grab some of the fabric of the bottom of the truck and then some of that loop from the bottom of the truck bed. And we're just going to sew all the way across. Alright, so I've sewn all the way across, so now we can sort of fold the truck bed up. So we've secured it to the bottom of the truck. And then we're going to sew the two sides of it together here. So I'm going to grab some of the fabric here at the side of the truck bed and then some of the fabric at the side of the cab and just continue whip stitching, really securely attaching these two together. Great, so you can see I've got the bed attached. I'm going to go back through the top of the bed here. Then we need to attach the top of the bed sort of to the underside of the back window. So we're going to keep whip stitching, grabbing some of the fabric of the cab, some of the fabric of the bed, just working our way across. Notice I'm sewing through that top row there on the truck bed, just grabbing the stitches, sewing through each one. Alright, so I've sewn all the way across the back of the truck and the inside front of the bed here. Then I need to attach the side of the bed to this side of the cab. So I'm just going to sew back down Sort of the same way I did on the opposite side, heading back towards the bottom of the truck. You can see I'm just kind of grabbing the stitches here on the way down, pulling pretty tight to hide the stitches that I've sewn. Alright, and that takes me all the way back to where I started sewing and gets the truck's bed attached, so we are ready to go ahead and fasten off. Do that by tying another surface knot. And then we're just going to weave this tail into the fabric of the truck's bed, or the truck's cab. You can weave into the bed too if you want. And trim. Alright, and that is the bed crocheted and attached. So we're ready to move on to the next part of the pattern. Alright, so next up we need to make the truck's wheels, and we're going to be using this white colored yarn for the first round and then switching to black on the second round. So we're going to start by making a magic ring. And then we need to place 7 single crochet stitches inside of this magic ring. Alright, there are all 7 of those single crochet stitches. I'm going to pull the magic ring tail. And then we're going to be slip stitching and chaining 1 to start our second round. But we need to pull through with our slip stitch in black. So I'm going to go ahead and give the white a trim. Grab my black color here. Make a little loop like we've done so far with all of our color changes. And use my hook to pull through the fabric of that stitch and the white loop on my hook. Then I'm going to go ahead and give the magic ring tail a quick trim here. It gets a little confusing with all these tails kind of hanging out on the back of our work. And then grab the white tail from our color change, the black tail from our color change, and give them both a tight pull. And then we're ready to chain 1, and we're going to be increasing in each stitch all the way around. I'm going to work in the color change tails as I go too, so I have one less thing to worry about whenever I get to the end of each wheel. And we're just putting 1 single crochet stitch or 1 increase in each back loop all the way around. Alright, so I am all the way around. I'm ready to slip stitch and I'm ready to fasten off. So I'm going to cut a long tail. We're going to use this to sew the tires to the truck. Pull and then tighten that slip stitch down. And then I'm going to go ahead and give these 2 tails that I wove in here a trim. And I'm going to make sure my magic ring tail is just hanging on the back side of my work here. Alright, so that is the first tire. We need to make 3 more for a total of 4, and then we can get them attached to the truck. Alright, so I have all 4 of the tires and I'm ready to get them attached. So we're going to be putting 2 on either side. The first of which is going to be kind of here on the front of the truck, sort of where the cab and the hood meet, and then we want a little of it hanging over the bottom of the truck. So I'm going to make it so that my wheel, the tail that I'm going to be using to attach, is about even with the bottom of the truck, because we're going to be sewing along the top part of the wheel to attach it. So let's get our needle threaded with the tail from the tire. And to attach, I'm going to be going into the fabric of the truck and up through one of those single crochet stitches from the second round of the wheel. And I'm going to just sew each of those stitches on. Working my way around, grabbing some of the fabric of the truck with each stitch that I sew through. Alright, so I am all the way across the top of the wheel. The bottom of the wheel doesn't need to be sewn on. It's going to kind of sit loose so that it kind of sits up like a regular wheel on a truck would. So I'm going to go ahead and tie a surface knot. I'm going to make sure my tail is coming out of the fabric of the black part of the tire, and then tie the surface knot on a black stitch because that's going to hide the knot that we're making. And then I'm going to weave this tail in by sewing it down through the black part of the tire and then out through any stitch here on the body of the truck. Then I can unthread and trim. So there's that first tire done. Then on this same side, our second tire is going to be attached to the bed, sort of a same way with half of the tire hanging off of the body of the truck. So line up the half section with the bottom so that your tail starts right where you want to start sewing. And we're going to sew it on the same way, going through the fabric of the truck's bed and then in through some of the stitches from that last round on the tire. With the truck's bed, be really careful not to sew through both layers. We want to make sure that the black stitches aren't in the inside of the truck bed too. So try to just snag that first layer of fabric. Alright, so there's that second wheel attached. Just like with the first, I'm gonna tie a surface knot. And then weave that into the layers of the truck bed, setting it so it's in between the two layers of fabric we have going on here in the truck bed. Then I can unthread and trim. And the two remaining tires are going to go on the opposite side, pretty much even with the front tires. The front tires even, the back tires even from side to side. And they're sewn on the exact same way. So I'll be back whenever I have them attached and we're ready to move on in our pattern together. Alright, so I have all 4 of the tires attached, and next up we're going to add the wheel wells, which adds a really nice detail that kind of makes the wheels look a little more natural here on our truck. So first we need to start so that our truck is facing to our left, and we're going to begin by fastening on here on this loop left behind on the truck's bed right next to where this back tire is. And we're going to be fastening on with red itself. So let's get the red yarn and then go through that front loop we got left behind here on our truck bed and make a little loop with this red and pull it through and pull the tail through and then tie the 2 ends together to fasten on. And then I'm going to leave this end behind and weave it in, because it's going to be hard to weave in as we work here. So I'm ready to go ahead and yarn over and pull up a loop in that same loop I fastened on. And then we're going to be working in the back loops here of the last round of the wheel, adding a single crochet stitch to each. So grab the closest one you can get your hook through. We're going to add a single crochet stitch. And just keep adding 1 single crochet stitch to each of those back loops, working all the way around the top of the tire here. Alright, so you can see I have single crocheted all the way around the top part of the back tire. Then I'm going to grab the front loops here, left behind on the truck's bed. Here's the one closest to the wheel. I'm going to add a single crochet stitch. I'm going to keep single crochet stitching, and I'm going to grab some of the stitches here where the bottom of the truck and the cab kind of meet and continue working along, adding a little bit of detail here, working my way towards that front tire. So we're going to get right up on that front tire and then do the same thing that we did with the back tire. So here's this last single crochet stitch, adding that detail from the back wheel well to the front wheel well. I'm going to go through the back loops of the front tire, adding one single crochet stitch to each. Alright, so I am all the way across the top of the front tire, so I am ready to fasten off and then get my ends woven in. So I'm going to make sure I'm working in the fabric of the truck itself and not here on the wheel. I'm going to make a slip stitch into that next stitch on the truck and then cut a short tail just to weave in. Don't need very much. We'll pull that last loop and tighten. Alright, so let's start by weaving in the short tail from fastening on. I'm going to give it a tug and then thread my needle and send it into the space between layers of fabric on the truck's bed, out through a random place, and trim. And then on this front tail, I don't have to worry about getting it in between the layers. I can just weave it right into the fabric of the truck and out through any old place, and then trim. Alright, so that is one side done, adding in that detail that gives our truck its wheel wells. We're going to do the same thing here on the other side, but we need to start this time in the area right next to the front tire, so our stitches are facing the correct direction. So we'll fasten on just like we did before, right next to where that front tire is with red, and then just work our way across in the back loops of the tires, and of course fastening off and weaving in our tails. So I'll catch you back here whenever I have that done and ready to add some details to the doors. Alright, so I have both of the wheel wells on both sides done. Next up, we're going to add a little detail here, so we have a car door. So we're going to be sewing with this black embroidery floss, adding sort of an angle here along the front, and then the bottom of the door and the handle. So I've got some black embroidery floss here on my needle. I'm going to start by sending the needle into the fabric of the truck, in between the spaces of stitches. I'm going to come up here even with the corner of the door and about halfway above the wheel well here for me. And I'm going to leave a little tail on the outside because I'm going to come back and tie onto that. Then we're just going to run a long straight stitch here so that it's about, almost at the bottom of the truck, maybe 2 rows above. I'm going to sew in and then across to about where the door ends. So even with the bottom of this side of the window, I'm going to come up through. And then I'm going to sew back and down through where I came up. It's going to make a door here. And then I'm going to sew the handle and then the right hand side of the door too. So I'm going to come up here even with sort of the corner of the window. That's going to sew the bottom of the door. As you can see, we've got a little bit here. Then the handle's going to be sort of an L shape, so I'm going to sew down and then across about 2 stitches away, and then back over to make the handle. And then we're going to sew a straight stitch even with the corner of the window, and sort of down and even with the bottom part of the door. Then we're going to sew across and back up through the space of stitches that we came down through with our tail on this side here. So try not to snag any of the fabric of your work, and feel free, you can kind of squish your truck to get it. That's kind of what I'm doing here with my needle. But you can see that forms the door of our truck. I can unthread, and I'm going to tie these 2 tails together to secure all of the things that I've just sewn. Then we'll trim these really short, very, very close to the fabric of our work. And using our needle or our crochet hook, we're going to grab some of the fabric and then pull up on it to sort of take the knot to the inside. You can also use your needle to push the knot to the inside too. Alright, so there's one of the door handles, the door and door handle sewn on. We need to repeat on the opposite side, making that same sort of shape with the handle as well. Alright, so I have both of the doors sewn on, and now we need to add the front and the back bumper. So let's start with the front bumper. We're going to fasten on right here at the front of the car, kind of right where our wheel well is, and then grab this pastel colored yarn, pastel yellow, and we're going to make a little loop and pull through. And fasten on just like we have with all of our colors so far. And then this one's okay for us to try to weave in as we work, so I'm going to weave this tail in as I go. Okay, and then we're ready to go ahead and work 15 single crochet stitches across the front of this truck. It could be a little shorter or a little further depending on how close your wheels are set. So let's see how many stitches it takes for me to get across here. So it took me about 13 stitches. I think my wheels are scooted just a little further forward, so it may take you less, it may take you more. The idea is we want to connect the wheel wells with this pastel colored yarn for our front bumper. But once you get all the way across, we're going to go ahead and slip stitch in the stitch our last single crochet stitch is in, and then fasten off with a short tail. We're going to use this just to weave in. Then I can trim my fasten on tail. I wove it in for my full bumper, and we'll weave in the tail we just cut. We're just going to send it down and into fabric of the wheel well, and then straight inside of the truck and out through any stitch, and pull and trim. Alright, so there is the front bumper. Let's do the same on the back. So we're going to fasten on next to the back wheel well, and I'm holding my truck upside down here, so I'm going to just slip through, and we'll do the same thing here. Fasten on with that pastel yellow color. And weave in our tail as we go. And again with this one here, it really depends on how far apart you've set your wheels. So I'm going to go ahead and just single crochet across, grabbing those back loops and taking my fasten on tail with me. So our pattern says for 15 stitches. We'll see how many it takes me. Alright, so it was about 13 stitches for me again on the back bumper. So I think I've got my back wheel set maybe just a little bit further back. So it may take a little more, more, or a little less for you. One of the great things about crochet is fairly flexible. We just want it so that the bumper connects the wheel wells in the back of the truck. So just like with the front of the truck, we're going to slip stitch in that same stitch our last single crochet stitch is going through. We cut a tail to weave in. And I wove in my tails over here. One of the tails for my wheel well actually came unfastened, but fortunately I was able to weave it in with the bumper's tail. So I've got that little red tail there too. And then we're just going to weave this in just like we did with the last one by sewing it straight into the fabric of the truck. And since we're working in the fabric of the bed of the truck, be careful not to accidentally sew into that top layer on the inside of the bed. I give my truck bed a little shape here now that I've sort of squished it while I was sewing. And then trim this tail. You can see that adds that nice colorful bumper here to the front and the back side of the truck. Then we need to make the headlights last. So we're going to be using that same pink color we used on the truck's windows. And we need to make 2 headlights, so we'll start with 1 magic ring. Well, the headlights are pretty easy. Just 4 single crochet stitches inside of our magic ring. And then slip stitch to the top of that first one that you made. And then I'm going to pull through the slip stitch here, so I'm going to cut a long tail to sew with. And I'm going to pull through with the magic ring tail and the tail that I just cut and pull them both through and tighten them both down. So there is one of the headlights. Let's make a second one and then we'll get them attached and wrap this pattern up. Alright, so there are both of the headlights done for me, and they're going to attach to the front of the truck, sort of in between that front loop that was left behind and the bumper, and of course kind of centered so that they're evenly spaced across the front. So to start, let's thread the tail from the magic ring through our needle first. And then we're going to send that about where our headlight's going to be positioned, straight through the fabric of the truck and out through a random spot. Which weaves that tail in, but also helps hold the tail light, or the headlight, on to where we're going to be sewing. Then we'll attach it with the longer of the 2 tails. And we're going to attach it sort of like how we did with the wheels. Grab some of the fabric of the truck's body and then sew up through the single crochet stitch there on our last and only round. And just keep working our way around. Sewing through all 4 of those stitches. Alright, so when you've sewn through all 4 and the headlight is attached really securely, we're going to tie a surface knot in the surface of the headlight to hide the knot. And then just like with the magic ring tail we already wove in, we'll weave in this tail too. And give them both a trim. And then we'll repeat with the other headlight, so starting by weaving in the magic ring's tail first. Alright, and with the headlights attached, that wraps up the truck's pattern.